and good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending this Zoom presentation. My name is Susie Rollins. I'm the Welfare Benefits Coordinator. I work at the London Borough of Merton, and my remit is to ensure Merton residents are made aware of their benefit entitlements and to support them with applying for the appropriate benefits if they need my support. And I would just like to take the opportunity to definitely thank you all. I recognise some names, which is good. And so I'm really pleased, and hopefully what I have to share with you today will be useful and will give you some sense of reassurance and as well as knowledge, and then we move forward with that. So I will start by first talking about universal credit and the migration process of universal credit. And just so that you know, for those who are not aware, universal credit has actually been in place since October 2013, believe it or not. And it's just in recent years, they have decided to target those who are in receipt of legacy benefits. And when I say legacy benefits, I do mean employment and support allowance, income support, and job seekers allowance. And basically, eventually, all recipients, all people in receipt of any of these legacy benefits will be sent a letter inviting them to apply for universal credit. This letter is known as Universal Credit Migration Letter. And as you can imagine, myself and my officer, we've certainly been quite busy with assisting and supporting people with this process. And a key thing you need to understand is please don't panic if your cared for person receives one of these letters. All you need to do is read it carefully and especially check for the deadline, which is typically approximately 3 months, so 13 weeks prior. That's the period that they're allowing you time to make an application for universal credit. Now, the key thing I've realised with this particular process is we have been reassured that once the claim is submitted, the processing time allowed is no more than 4 weeks. And I have to say, in all honesty, that seems to be the case in my experience of assisting various clients with this particular process. I'm confident when I say that it appears they are actually receiving their first payment within the first 4 to 5 weeks after making the claim, which is very impressive, because for anyone else who has to just simply apply for universal credit without the migration trigger, the typical processing time takes anything between 5 to 8 weeks. So I would say that the key thing is do not panic. Now, universal credit is replacing 6 legacy benefits, as I mentioned: ESA, JSA, income support, as well as tax credits and housing benefit. So if you're caring for somebody who's responsible for also paying rent and council tax, then there will be additional benefits that you would need to access to ensure for their financial well-being, so to speak. Now, what I would say, in my experience, myself and my officer, we've found that information is power in relation to you give them as much information as possible about the vulnerable person or vulnerable adult that you're representing or caring for. It's very important that if you can, take the opportunity to declare yourself as their DWP appointee, or that you wish to become their DWP appointee. And this literally means that you're offering a blanket of protection for your vulnerable adult to ensure their financial well-being and to ensure that the Universal Credit team communicate directly with you on every occasion, rather than trying to access information from your vulnerable adult, because they'll definitely try and communicate directly with them, I'm afraid. That's the way they work, and that's the way they their attitude is, this person's potentially a job seeker, therefore we need them to be treated as a job seeker. And if it's not clear that they are vulnerable, they will certainly just go down that pathway of treating them as a job seeker, which is crucial that you make sure they understand, first and foremost, this is a vulnerable adult and they lack the capacity to quite understand what's expected of them regarding their commitments or involvement in trying to access universal credit. Now, the other thing I would say is if your cared for person is receiving contributionary ESA or contributionary JSA, then their payments will continue. Actually, they're not affected by universal credit. So it is important that you try and check through their paperwork to see whether they are currently in receipt of income-related JSA or income-related ESA, or if they're in receipt of the contributionary parts. And basically, it's a case of making sure that if they do receive that migration letter, you respond and you've got access to our team and we can support you with the process in relation to completing the form. We can offer you a welfare benefit telephone appointment to complete the form with you on your vulnerable adult person's behalf, and we can ensure that the need for DWP appointeeship is recognised as soon as possible as well, and that process is started. And I would say that it is complicated and it can be a little bit, I won't lie, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. It's a very new process, it's all online. You can communicate with them by telephone. You cannot meet with them as such. You can only deal with them by telephone or through the Universal Credit Journal, where you can send messages. They will send you text messages if that's your first option, or they will send you emails if that's what you would prefer. The actual recipient or applicant has to have an active email address, and that's something that you may have to create for them on their behalf to ensure that they are able to make the claim for universal credit. And we would ask, if we're involved in assisting you for your vulnerable adult, we would ask that you make sure they have an accessible email account as well as they would need to have bank details, whether it's their own or if it's yours. That part of it doesn't matter. The most important thing is universal credit need to have a record of said bank account to ensure that payments can be paid safely and within reason. Now, I would say that, again, in my experience, the transition can be quite smooth and it is working within the first 4 to 5 weeks. First payments are coming through. What we do is when we make that payment, when we make that application, we always insist on a few things. First of all, if the applicant is liable to pay rent, we would ask that the housing element of universal credit is made directly payable to the landlord to ensure minimal confusion regarding the actual amount paid to the recipient, because universal credit is paid monthly. So they would be getting a lump sum amount of money, which may seem quite a lot, but then it is so important that you try and make sure that the housing element is separated and paid directly to the landlord to minimize confusion and also to ensure rent arrears do not occur. In addition, we try and make sure that there is a thing called transitional payment protection or transitional protection payment facility, which is directly linked to the universal credit migration reference number, which will be on the letter. This needs to be quoted when you make the claim for universal credit to ensure that the applicant receives the exact amount, the same amount that they're receiving under the legacy benefits is exactly what they continue to receive under universal credit, because I'm sure you're aware universal credit is notoriously less than legacy benefits. So, for example, I do know that ESA is currently around £420 every 2 weeks. In comparison, universal credit is simply £393 per month. So quite a vast difference. So it is important that we do request the transitional protection payment facility to be applied as soon as possible. And finally, we would also ask that the recipient be paid every 2 weeks, as is the current case for them, rather than monthly. And that's something that you have to request. Sometimes you have to put that request in quite a few times, unfortunately, because Universal Credit do struggle to step outside the normal process, which because they would see it as something unusual. But we always insist this is a vulnerable adult. They lack financial awareness, or they would struggle to budget accordingly. Therefore, we would ask that they're paid every 2 weeks rather than every month. And finally, I would say that with regards to payments, you should always, as the person representing the vulnerable adult, you should always make sure you check that payments are going through into their bank account. And if there's any issues, hopefully as the DWP appointee, you'll be in a position to query it with Universal Credit, and you should do so by telephone. But when you communicate with them by telephone, always follow it up by sending a message in the journal. Okay. Now, I would normally say to you that, Universal Credit, they know what they're doing. But unfortunately, when you're dealing with them face to face at the local job centre, they are very much trained just to capture job seekers, and they are not trained in the process. They're not trained in answering any questions beside Universal Credit. So you'll find when you go along to the job centre for that initial identification meeting, any questions that you may have, you need to relay them directly to the Universal Credit headquarters. And I would recommend that you start sending messages through on the Universal Credit journal account, rather than asking the Universal Credit coach the ins and outs, because they are not technically trained, I'm afraid. Their remit is quite simply to capture job seekers, to make sure they are ready and willing to look for work and find work and secure work. So it would be completely inappropriate for them to, help you in any other way apart from to do with work or actively looking for work. Unfortunately, they are nice and polite because they have to be, but they won't be able to answer many questions. So I would recommend that you contact Universal Credit directly for any concerns or questions that you might have about your vulnerable adults claim for Universal Credit. Now, I think, like I said, in our experience, it is quite straightforward for us, myself and my officer, Sophie. If we're involved, we know exactly the process of how to apply. And we would just ask that you trust us to do the best that we can to support you. But if you feel like you can do it yourself, that's fine. We can give you some tips on how to complete the form and how to submit it, etc., online, because it's all just strictly online. I would say that, it's been quite straightforward for us. The actual process of submitting the claim takes a typical 1 hour for us. And I personally have been conducting these Universal Credit migration applications now since last year, March, April. And I could tell you, for example, the applications that I submitted in April, they were paid by the end of May, which is a good thing. Some of them were not, some of them were a little bit complicated, but overall issues were resolved within a good time, within a reasonable time. Now, if you have any questions about what I've just spoken about, please do make a note of your questions and I'll take the opportunity to answer them at the end. Now, I was going to move on to personal independence payment. Now, personal independence payment, as I'm sure you're aware, has been in place since around April 2013, and it's still in the process of replacing disability living allowance for anybody of working age 16 to 64. If your vulnerable adult is already in receipt of personal independence payment, then I'm sure you'll also be used to receiving PIP review forms, or where they want to do a check every 3 to 4 years thereafter. I would say that these forms, we obviously help Merton residents complete the review form, so you're welcome to contact us if you'd like some support with it. I would always say that when it comes to doing the personal independence payment application to begin with, it's very important that the initial claim, you include as much evidence as possible about the person's vulnerabilities, illnesses, and disability, and make sure that the form is completed thoroughly and a copy is made, as well as, you send it off by special delivery. You're welcome to contact us if you'd like our support with this form. Again, we'd offer a welfare benefit telephone appointment, or on occasion, we may book a face-to-face appointment at the Civic Centre to help you complete the PIP form. And what we do is we complete it on your behalf. If we need extensions, we would ask for an extension and so on, and update you accordingly. And we would send it off by special delivery and send you a copy of the completed form. And we will continue to support you with the next step, which after the form's received, the PIP decision maker will then allocate and refer the person for a medical assessment, and whereby the person will be interviewed by telephone, video link, or face-to-face. And again, if you tell us that you've got this personal independence payment medical assessment booked, we would certainly offer you our guidelines to help you prepare. And we could also do a quick telephone call, prep call, to let you know what to expect and how to prepare yourself and prepare your vulnerable adult. Again, hopefully you'll have the DWP appointeeship in place, which means they should talk to you rather than your vulnerable adult. However, as part of their requirement, we would always advise you to be sure to tell them that you're the advocate for this vulnerable adult, and you thereby would like to speak on their behalf if and when you need to. The whole process of applying for PIP can take anything between 3 to 6 months, I'm afraid. It's a very long, drawn-out process because of the medical assessment, because of the waiting time, and of course, because there's high demand for this particular type of benefit. And we're seeing a massive increase in applications and submissions because, people are becoming far more vulnerable and are now being diagnosed far more, especially with neurodiversity conditions and so on. We, on average, for every 10 applications we submit, we do get a good outcome, a positive outcome for every 8. So we're very pleased with our records, and we would urge you to get in touch with us if you need help. At the very least, we could send you some tips on how to fill out the form if you feel confident about doing the form yourself. With PIP, as you know, I'm sure, it's all about the person's care needs, really, more so than anything else, about their vulnerability and their lack of capacity to function safely. So it's so important that evidence is provided regarding their medical condition and or disability, but it's the way that form is completed, and it must be thorough and very detailed when completing that form. Again, like I said, we've got our PIP tips. If you'd rather do it yourself, that's absolutely fine. I mean, I'm sure you know that with PIP, it's made up of 2 components. You've got the daily living component, which is 2 rates. And then you've got the mobility component, which again is 2 rates, both standard or enhanced. Daily living component is all about the person's capacity to function or not. And the mobility component is all about the person's capacity to move, as well as their capacity to travel. Now, we know that in particular, the mobility component is notoriously difficult to access. We do our best to urge you to provide as much evidence as you can regarding for both components, really. And that's what will help us try and get you a good outcome for your vulnerable adult as such. In relation to universal credit, I must say, if a person's awarded PIP, it doesn't make any difference to their universal credit claim, unfortunately, unlike the legacy benefit ESA, whereby they would have been awarded the disability premium if no one's receiving carer's allowance. However, under universal credit, being in receipt of PIP is irrelevant to them, but it's still important that if if the vulnerable adult is awarded PIP, you must inform universal credit, because that is on, then that's on record, and that reinforces their vulnerability. Now, I would say that, again, with PIP, it can be complicated and challenging, but we do our very best to be as thorough as we can, as methodical as we can be. It is almost like a scientific approach that we use when we complete that form for a person. And we do our very best consistently to be thorough, detailed, and methodical. So we would ask that you're patient with us, and please don't panic if we are asking for extensions. It's because we need that amount of time to make sure we do a good job on that form. And moving on to disability living allowance, I mean, this one is really for children. I would say, again, evidence is important. Now, disability living allowance is a disability award, like just similar to PIP, but it's targeted at children aged 0 right through to 16, 15 and a half, 16 years old. And it's whereby the child is living with a severe medical condition and or disability that affects their capacity to function safely. And it's all about what more do you have to do for this child compared to a child who does not have this particular condition or disability, because on paper, all children are supposed to be looked after. So it is quite literally, you've got to demonstrate how much more complicated and challenging it is to look after this child compared to a child who does not have this disability. And it can be, the younger the child, the more challenging it is to try and get an award of DLA, to be frank, to be honest. I would say that typically our success rate for the DLA form is still quite consistently good. For every 10 forms that we do, we get a success rate of 7 to 8, which is, in my opinion, quite good still. And it's all about the evidence. So if you have a child who's been recently diagnosed with, for example, a neurodiverse condition, it's a case of making sure there's sufficient evidence to support their special needs, in particular special educational needs in the school. And you know, SEN reports and the educational healthcare plan reports are crucial. If they are pending, that's fine, but if they've not even started the process, that would be challenging for a DLA claim. We would always ask for you to try and gather as much evidence before we help you pursue the claim. If you wish to do it yourself, we have some DLA tips to help you along. And again, we would apply the same attitude of being methodical, detailed, and, you know, as thorough as we can be when it comes to completing that DLA form for the child. And we would ask for your patience again. And we would certainly make sure that when we complete the form, it's sent off by special delivery, and a copy is also sent to you. And also we would ask you to keep in touch with us. For any forms that we do, we would always ask for you to keep in touch with us to make sure we can monitor what's happening and continue to support you as we go along, because we know that all of these forms can take quite a long time to process in the first place, unfortunately. Now, with regards to DLA, it can make a difference if the child is awarded. So it's important that, you know, if a child is awarded DLA, you do let us know, or you certainly make sure you inform any other agencies where you're receiving benefits. So for example, if you're receiving universal credit for yourself and your child's now been awarded DLA, that would make a difference to your universal credit claim. And also, you know, they could consider extra elements, in particular the carer element, and there's a disabled child element as well. In addition, you may be eligible for the Freedom Pass or the Blue Badge as well. Well, that would be the case for any disability-related benefits. But it's so important that you inform all agencies of the fact that your child has now been awarded DLA, and in particular, be sure to inform the school that the child's now been awarded DLA as well. Now, moving on to employment and support allowance, which is a legacy benefit. This one is being removed slowly but surely. But for those who still have vulnerable adults in receipt of ESA, I can honestly say to you that, you know, eventually your vulnerable adult will be sent the universal credit migration letter. The target, I believe, is they want to try and get this done within the next 2 to 3 years. You know, 2 to 3 years completion regarding everyone moving from the legacy benefits such as ESA over to universal credit is quite a big task. It's been going on now for the past few years, and there's still quite a lot for the government to do, irrelevant of which party's in charge. They're still moving forward with universal credit, unfortunately. Anyway, with ESA, as always, your vulnerable adult will still be sent medical assessment questionnaires. And if you need help with them, you can certainly get in touch with us about it, and we will offer you a telephone appointment to complete the ESA form accordingly. It's known as the ESA 50. Now, with regards to ESA, as I said, it is slowly but surely disappearing. So, you know, it's just a case of, at the moment, if a person's in receipt of ESA, their benefit will not be disrupted until such time as they receive the universal credit migration. ESA, as before, is a disability benefit known for if you're not able to work or look for work. It's a benefit that if you're incapacitated, it's a benefit that's applied in the past, no more, I'm afraid, but in the past it's been previously applied. And, you know, we have in the past helped people to apply for ESA, but now, like I said, it would be universal credit, unfortunately. But I would say that anyone that's currently in receipt of ESA, there shouldn't be any disruptions. And, you know, if, for example, they do receive the ESA 50 medical assessment questionnaire, it is important to complete and send it off as soon as possible with any relevant up-to-date copies of evidence to support that claim, because you're reinforcing the fact that the person, the vulnerable adult, remains vulnerable, remains unable or incapable of working, and therefore their ESA should not be disrupted. Everything is time sensitive as well. I must add that everything is time sensitive. There's lots of deadlines to meet. When you receive these questionnaires, there's a cover letter, and you must read that cover letter thoroughly. And as always, don't panic, just read it through. And if you get in touch with us, we would ask you to read that letter to us so that we know exactly how much time you've got to complete the questionnaire for ESA. What I would say is, you know, as it's a benefit, a legacy benefit that's slowly being removed, less and less people will be in receipt of ESA. And eventually, when it does deplete, when it disappears, you'll find that not much more will be said about it unless the person's in receipt of contributions-based ESA. If they're in receipt of contributions-based ESA, that will continue indefinitely. So, and that won't be disrupted by universal credit as far as we're aware. Okay. And I mean, what I would say is, as with all things, it's time sensitive, and it's crucial that you just make sure that you continue to be your vulnerable adults DWP appointee in all cases when it comes to all benefits. I must reinforce that point, and I'll send you some information about DWP. Oh, sorry, just one moment, sorry. Oh gosh, where's that gone? Oh, no, don't do that. Right, sorry about that. Right. Okay, so moving on to pension credit. Right, so pension credit is pension credit is a means-tested benefit which can be considered for anyone of retirement age only. And if you're a couple, both of you need to be of retirement age before you can access the claim for pension credit. Now, I am aware that there was quite a massive surge of applications submitted from last year during the winter months as such, because of the government announcement that the winter fuel payment was going to be removed from as a universal benefit, and only those in receipt of pension credit could therefore apply or be in receipt of the winter fuel payment. In response to that, we did a couple of campaigns, and there was a nice big healthy surge of applications, which ironically some are still being processed or still waiting for their decisions to come through. But what I would say about pension credit, the requirement is the applicant needs to be in receipt of state pension or about to receive their state pension within 3 months. And also they need to have savings of less than £10,000. And they need, if they have any other income, such as a private pension or work pension, that needs to be declared. Now, we obviously help people with applying for pension credit. And like I said, we've had quite a good success rate, to be honest. And, you know, albeit some of our applicants are still waiting for decisions going back to November, December, because there's been such a massive demand for this particular benefit. But what I would say, pension credit is definitely the one to try for if you're retired, if you're receiving your state pension, if you have savings under 10,000. And even if you have any other income, it's still definitely worthwhile pursuing, just to find out if you're eligible for even a small amount. Because if you qualify for a small amount of pension credit, for example, £10 a week, it means that you're automatically eligible to also receive help, full help with your rent and your council tax. And we always ask, when we assist somebody with a claim for pension credit, we always encourage them to keep in touch with us to let us know the outcome, because we know that there's an opportunity for them to pursue other means tested benefits, which we would obviously assist them with. And again, we offer welfare benefit telephone appointments for this. And for us, it's quite a straightforward application, online application. So we would say, you know, if they need our help, please contact us. If they'd rather contact the pension service, they can certainly do so and make a telephone application. And in some cases, they'll be told straight away whether or not they're entitled, and they'll even be given the figure. Not every single time, but in some cases, we know that's the case. And I would say with pension credit, one of the biggest benefits, of course, apart from the winter fuel payment, is, you know, the pensioner may be eligible for extra help with free prescriptions, and also help with eye tests and opticians charges and dental charges as well. So it can make a big difference to their lifestyle. And it's so important, if a pensioner's savings are quickly depleting, that they should pursue it, because an awful lot of our pensioners dismiss it and say, well, I've got savings, so I'm not going to. And we always say to them, look, you know, how much savings roughly have you got? And even if they say, well, I've got over 10,000, we always urge them to get in touch with us once their savings deplete, because we would certainly assist them, because we know that the likelihood is, once savings are below 10,000, they may qualify even for a small amount, which could make a big difference to their financial well-being. Now, what I would say overall as well is, you know, with all of these benefits in particular, it's a case of just making sure that you gain as much information as you can. Sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. In particular, universal credit, I know that's a big one. It can be quite overwhelming, but I would say that we as a team, myself and my officer Sophie, we're always here to assist and support you and provide guidance to ensure that, you know, you've got the right information and to help you make the correct decisions regarding financial well-being for yourself or for your vulnerable adult. And yeah, I think that's it. I think I've finished already, you know. I'm happy to take questions, if that's all right. Because I didn't want to go into too much technical stuff, if that makes sense. So, you know, I just wanted to quite literally provide an overview. So, Tahina, I think I'm ready for any questions.
Yeah, no, you.
Yeah. Let's discuss attendance allowance. Now, attendance allowance, one of my favourites, it's again for pensioners, and it is quite literally, if the person, the retired person or pensioner, is living independently as much as they can in their own home, and they are reliant on carers perhaps to help them manage on a daily basis, it's certainly a facility, a disability related benefit that's worthwhile applying for, because attendance allowance, they're not concerned about income, savings, home ownership. It's all about the person's disability and or severe medical condition, and whether or not they need any type of support to help them function and manage on a daily basis. With attendance allowance, it's all about your personal care needs. So how much care and attention do you need to get up, get out of your bed, have a bath or shower, have something to eat, take your medication, move around, go out and participate in the community. So whether it's going to church or whether it's going to a day centre, do you need organised transport? Do you need somebody with you to support you for that journey? With attendance allowance, what I'm finding more and more is, we are sadly getting more cases of dementia, Alzheimer's disease applicants, which is appropriate. It's very important that those particular scenarios are addressed, and attendance allowance is appropriate for them to apply for. In particular, what's positive about that type of example is if the person's awarded attendance allowance because of their cognitive impairment, in return, they could also get extra help with their council tax bill in the form of one of the council tax exemptions known as severe mental impairment. And if they are renting on their own, or they live on their own and they rent, or they own their own property and they live on their own, potentially they could get 100% of that bill made exempt. If they live with a partner or family, then at least 25% could be made exempt because of the severe mental impairment. I must make a point of sending that information as well. SMI, council tax with AA. Again, we offer assistance with completing the attendance allowance form. And what we ask is, with the evidence, supportive evidence is crucial, as well as the way the form's completed. We focus on the person's vulnerabilities and the fact that they lack the capacity to function safely. I think crucially, the most important thing is making sure you're thorough with the information. And all we ask is that you, try your best to get us the evidence that we need in order to pursue the claim. And again, we would complete the form, send a copy to the applicant, as well as send the original form off by special delivery to the attendance allowance unit. They take about 8 weeks to process the application. And, that's the average waiting time, I'm afraid. But it's all worthwhile, because if they qualify, that severe mental impairment council tax exemption is definitely beneficial, financially beneficial to the applicant as well. And moving on to carers allowance, again, I'll send some information about that. If your vulnerable adult is in receipt of personal independence payment or disability living allowance or attendance allowance, and you as the main carer are available to care for them for at least 35 hours per week, you could pursue a claim for carers allowance. Again, we can offer you assistance with that claim because you can do it online. Or if you prefer, you can contact the carers allowance unit directly and ask for the form to be posted to you if you wish to complete it yourself. With carers allowance, that's an additional amount of around £81 per week for you, paid to you as the carer. And as long as you continue to demonstrate that you're available to care for that person for at least 35 hours per week, it will still remain in payment for you. And in addition, if you are receiving any other benefits, such as universal credit, albeit universal credit as it's means tested will take carers allowance into account. However, they will also allocate an additional element known as the carers element. So it's a classic in one hand, out of the other. But so you literally will get some money, but they will take into account the carers allowance, I'm afraid. But I mean, overall, it's still worthwhile, because if you're classed as a carer in receipt of carers allowance, it then offers protection for you in relation to having to be made to look for work or having to become a job seeker. So it's beneficial for the carer to certainly pursue it if they wish to. Right, I think I've covered everything now. So I'm ready for any Q&As.